Hi, and welcome to the Build and Exit podcast. I'm Julie Wilkinson, and I started the podcast off the back of the work we do in Wilkinson Accounting Solutions because we help with mergers and acquisitions, and we help people, business owners, set up exit plans so that they can transition their business from a lifestyle to an asset. So today I'm here with Nigel Carley. Hi, Nigel.
Good morning, Julie, and good morning, listeners.
Nigel has a very unique and quite exciting business model, and we're going to talk about his journey today. So Nigel is co-founder of the Pinelli Group with his partner Dawn. He offers fractional ownership in properties in Italy, which we'll go into a little bit in the podcast so people understand what that actually means, because there is sometimes a bit of a misconception of it. But before starting the Pinelli Group, Nigel was a property investor for 35 years, mainly in student accommodation. But what I really like about Nigel's story, because I've known Nigel for a few years and talked to him a lot about this, and actually I've had the luxury of going to the properties in Italy as well, so they're very lovely, is really his journey of the dedication and passion he's put into building this business. And I think regardless of the actual business model that he's ended up with, he has successfully put a lot of time and energy into building a business model that he thinks is successful and is successfully running it. So I'm really excited. I think it's going to give a lot of information and support for business owners who are looking to start their journey, probably in whatever business they're looking for. So first of all, Nigel, I just want to thank you for coming on and hand over to you to give a little bit of a summary about yourself.
Well, thanks, Julie. I'd like to start with a sort of a personal journey. The Pinelli Group was formed in my mind a little over 10 or 15 years ago. And as I approached the age of retirement of 60 or 65, whichever floats your boat, I thought, well, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? And I went backwards in time before I went forwards in time. I've had a love affair with Italy now for 35, 40 years. And it started when I was a young lad working for Alfa Romeo, Great Britain, in London. And I was very, very fortunate. Didn't understand it at the time. But looking back, I was fortunate to be invited to attend training courses in Italy at least twice a year. And that sort of opened my eyes as to what and why people fall in love with Italy. Before that, I was fortunate to be trained by a wonderful man called Arthur Hadrick, an ex-miner with silicosis. He got dragged out of the mines, and he was a sales trainer for a men's outfitting company called Hepworth, which subsequently turned into Next. Some of our older members might remember Burton's and John Collier's and Hepworth's. Well, and Arthur said to me, there's two things you should really lead your life by, and they're phrases out of the Bible. I'm not the most religious person on the planet, but these two phrases resonated with me. The first is, whether you believe you're right or whether you believe you're wrong, you're right. And the second one was, whatever the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve. And these phrases have stayed with me all of my life. And when it came to me that I had the opportunity to actually create and fulfill my dream, Italy started to call again. But I didn't know where in Italy I wanted to be, because during my time with Alfa Romeo, I was lucky to visit just about every region of Italy. And they're all beautiful, and every single part of Italy has a special charm. And the difficulty was, how do I really make a decision? Because it's a decision that has to be made and stuck with. So I got a simple piece of paper out. I drew a line from top to the bottom, and at the top, a line across. And I put the reasons for and the reason against. And every single time I analysed my answers, I kept being drawn back to Italy's third largest region, which is Campania. Some people may know it, some may not. But if I mention the name of Amalfi or Positano or Naples, that's the area of Italy we're in. And Campania, as I said, is the third largest region of Italy, principally rural and agricultural. but hasn't been spoilt by explosions of tourism that we see in other parts of the world. So the journey started with me deciding where I wanted to be, but not what I wanted to have. And that began, I don't know, 2 or 3 years of investigating the type of property I wanted to buy for myself to renovate, to live in my retirement. And I was flying backwards and forwards to Italy maybe 2 or 3 times a month, collecting details from various estate agents. And it got to the point where my family and friends used to come round to my house and look at me and say, "Have you gone completely mad, Nigel?" And I say, "Why?" I said, "Well, all of your walls are covered with details of properties stuck on the wall." And I said, "Well, the reason I'm doing that is that eventually I'll find one, and that won't be the one that I wish I could have. That's the one that I own." And after a very, very long search of 50 or 60 properties, I eventually found by accident the one that I bought first of all. And I say by accident because working with estate agents in Italy is character building. That's the only way I would describe it, because they're not perhaps controlled or constrained by some of the rules and regulations that exist with English estate agents. And let's just be kind and say they exercise their poetic license somewhat. So one of the people that I was working with, a lovely lady called Joss, arranged to meet me at a property in Agropoli, which is about 90 minutes south of Naples. And the sat nav wasn't working, and I couldn't get Google Maps working on my phone because the signal wasn't particularly good. And I arrived at a property about 50 minutes before the appointment was due. And then it got to 5 minutes before, and then half an hour after. I thought, oh, well, we're in Italy, don't be impatient. And eventually we managed to speak to each other by telephone, and she was on one side of the valley and I was on the other side. And we both blamed each other about being at the wrong property at the wrong time. To cut a long story short, Joss met me at the property I'd accidentally turned up that wasn't even on the market for sale, but it matched all of the most important criteria. And I'd said to estate agents every single time, it's dead simple. The 3 criteria that are most important to me are: number 1, it can't be any more than 2 hours from an international airport, ideally less than that. It mustn't be any more than 15 or 20 minutes from a coast or a countryside location. But the most important one is that it mustn't be any less than 200 meters above sea level. And the Italian estate agents, even to this day, look at me and say, "Why is that important?" I said, "Well, you're Italian, and you should know that Italy is 48% mountain. So why wouldn't you want to be up somewhere with a view?" So the story began by me deciding what part of Italy I wanted to be in and the reasons why. And perhaps with Julie's permission, I can give those reasons a little bit later on. It involved me having years, and I think it was probably 30 months of hard work, of fine tuning down to a property that met every single criteria that we wanted. And that's Dawn, my wife and I. And then it stopped because once I'd chosen the area and the property, I knew I needed to surround myself with a very important team of people that had the expertise to help me on my journey of restoration. This was before the business model evolved. I knew that I needed a very good architect, a very good surveyor, a very good builder, a very good notary or lawyer, and a commercialista. And a commercialista in Italy is halfway between an accountant and a lawyer. Without those people, the Pinelli Group wouldn't be where it is today. So whilst Dawn and I are co-founders of the Pinelli Group, the Pinelli Group is a family of very, very important people in Italy and in England. But in Italy, they now aren't people that work for the Pinelli Group. They're people that work with the Pinelli Group. They're very, very important people. In fact, Dawn and I are godparents to our builder's son. So that's how close the relationship is.
It's really good, Nigel. And I think that concept of that 30 months and these properties, I mean, before you even had the full business model, I suppose in your mind, you're building a plan of what you wanted and still developing the journey. And this was one of the reasons I wanted to come on the podcast, because although it might be slightly different to some of the other acquisitions stories that we have, I think it's important for people to realise that, you know, when they hear how you've then proceeded on to the build of the Pinelli Group, which will come out in a bit, it just shows that the dedication and passion that goes into a business is real. You know, the hard work, whether you're doing it for your personal reasons or a business reasons, you've put that time and effort in, and then you've successfully grown this business. And I think it's really great. I think it's great that you've spent so much time, because visualizing and effectively building a business plan, you didn't have a 60-page deck that, you know, maybe was fancy, but you did, you know, you spent a long time visualizing, documenting, planning, which might have been initially for you, but that doesn't matter, because I do think most successful businesses are built off dreams. I think most successful businesses are built off people's dreams and what they love to do, more than a skill set that they've got.
Yeah, it's absolutely. And it's very, very easy, and we see it today with prospective clients that come and visit us, or even friends and family that come and visit us. It's very, very easy because Italy is quite an enticing, intoxicating country, and it's full of wonderful, emotion-provoking views and experiences. So it's very easy to let your heart run away with a decision. And I really did look at so many different properties, from absolute wrecks and ruins up to palaces. A kilometre and a half from where we live in Italy, still today, is a 22-room palace that's still for sale, and it's absolutely beautiful. And you could fall in love with it in a moment. But you really have to sit and ask yourself those two important words all the time: what if, what if, what if? And you have to then adopt a very sensible way to start to eliminate what you thought was an opportunity, and is that going to become a millstone round your neck, or a money pit? Kirsty and Phil, those two famous TV presenters on the property programs: location, location, location. Those three words are so important. And we get still today clients saying, yes, we love your properties, but we'd really like to be within 15 to 50 meters walk of the sea. Of course you would. And so would we. But you pay a premium. And do you really want to be that close to the sea when you're in the middle of July, August and September, where you can't move and you can't park? So the choice I had to really be very, very hard, and almost have two piles to say, these are the ones that I love, these are the ones that I can live with. Because it started, we must always remember, this dream started with me wanting to retire from business, buy a property and do it up by myself and live on my own in Italy. And just because I love the Italian way of life. And I suppose it's an opportune moment for me to perhaps explain why Campania was so important, and why that had won on every single selection process that I put in, and why it won over Lazio, where Rome is, or in different areas of Italy. Campania is the third largest region of Italy by landmass, not by population. It is surrounded by mountains, and it is very close to the sea. It has Italy's third largest national park on its southern border. And it has a climate that produces in excess of 300 days of sunshine a year, and has very, very temperate weather 12 months of the year. There's a story I often tell. The only time I've ever seen snow in my part of Italy, Campania, in the last 12 years was one February, when we had some friends from England visited us. This was in the early days of the restoration of our first property. And I drove them back to the airport around about 10 o'clock in the morning. Before we set off on the journey back to Naples Airport, I nipped up to the village to go and get some fresh bread and food for breakfast. And there's a little old fella, sadly, he's no longer with us, Giuseppe, an unusual Italian name. And whenever he saw me driving up the hill, he'd always flag the car down and invite me for a cup of coffee and try and steal some of my cigarettes. And he's a lovely, lovely guy, and I can remember many happy days of having a conversation. But this day I said, Giuseppe, what did you think about the snow this morning? He said, I've no idea what you're talking about. I said, the white stuff that comes down from the sky, the snow. He said, you're still a tourist. You'll always be a tourist until you understand the Italian way of life. I said, now I don't understand what you're talking about. He said, it's so rare that we see snow here. He said, he was in his 90s then. He said, I was born here. My mother was born here. My grandmother was born here. Our family goes back generations. Snow is so rare that when it arrives, we have a special name for it. And I said, what's that, Giuseppe? He said, Lacrime d'Angelo, and that means the tears of angels. So only an Italian can make something romantic out of what we don't like, snow. Yeah. So it was the region that was the biggest. It's protected because of UNESCO. It has fantastic climate. But really, the most important reason I chose Campania were the people. The Campagnesi, the people who live in Campania, are the most generous, kind people that I've ever met in my life. Before moving to Italy, I was a very hard, aggressive businessman, and I learned to use people and like things. Within 3 months, 12 weeks of living in Italy and starting the purchasing process of my property, I very, very quickly learned the importance of people and family and friends, and changed my life to using things and liking people. So this journey I've had is not only one of business building and inspiration, it was really life-changing for me because it changed my entire attitude to what's important in life.
Yeah, no, it's a lovely story. So when did the idea then transition from the retirement decision to actually the business idea? When did that kick in?
Good question. In my effort to search out the property that I wanted, I was overwhelmed with the number of ruined stone properties that existed in Campania. It's littered with them. And the reason it's littered with them probably goes back to post-Second World War, where so many of the local records were destroyed or lost. Their planning permission system, as we would perhaps understand it here in England, didn't come into being until 1969. So to discover the true ownership of ruined properties is an incredible, lengthy, difficult process, because in many cases the records just don't exist. And it's only by doing an immense amount of local research you can discover who owns what. So I'm looking around and suddenly light bulbs are flashing on my head saying, well, if I can buy this property for that, then surely I can replicate that process, but I've come here to retire. And suddenly the concept of retirement evaporated in a moment. And I just saw all of these properties. And I thought, why should I spend all of my time and money and effort restoring a property that I'm going to live in? And all of these properties that surround me are just going to be left and they're going to disappear. Maybe there's a way I can share in the dream. And then I spoke to a very old friend of mine who established a business exactly the same as the Pinelli Group in the north of Italy. I spent maybe a couple of weeks with him, and I understood and really got to grips with the concept of fractional ownership. And that's where the concept of having a dream that you can easily share with others started to be born, and my comprehension and understanding of what I now know as sustainable tourism started to become important. So many beautiful places, and I have to speak about Italy because I am not as intimately knowledgeable about Portugal and Spain and Greece, but I'm sure they have similar problems. But in Campania, this beautiful UNESCO protected countryside is littered with old stone ruins. Some are bought by individuals and they use them as holiday homes. So a fortunate couple or individual will buy that property and visit it maybe once or twice a year. And the reason they'll visit it once or twice a year is all the while we keep on working, people like you, Julie, and me, and the others listening to this podcast, we struggle to get any more than 5 weeks holiday a year because we're in a job and we're paid and our bosses say you get 5 weeks a year. And ironically, the more successful you are, and if you're lucky enough to run your own business, you have less time to have vacation than somebody who's in a job. Because if you're running a business and you take a holiday, the business starts to slow down because it's down to you. So if you can only buy a property and use it for 4 or 5 weeks a year, what happens to it for the other 47 weeks, 45 weeks of the year? Normally, it stays empty. So that means it's not being used. And if another person wants to do the same thing, you could have 12 properties, each doing nothing a year. And the number 12, I'll come back to in a minute why that's important. Our model makes it more sustainable because 12 individuals can share the ownership and share the use of that property during the year, which means one property is being used all of the time, not 12 properties being used part of the time. It's better for the environment. It's better for the local population. It's better for the local economy. It's just better for everybody. And for the people that actually understand and embrace fraction ownership, it's a far more prudent use of your capital. Why invest 100% of your available capital in something you can only use a fraction of the year? Reverse or turn that concept upside down and invest a fraction of your capital in something you can use 100% of your available time. And the other most important thing is you're not paying for all of the running costs by yourself. You only pay a fraction of the running costs. It's divided by 12. So that's where we were. So I took the dream of me just selfishly owning a property all by myself to turning it into the business model that we now have today. And that decision took me 3 or 4 months, not 2 or 3 years of finding the property. It's harder to find a property than it was to realise the business dream.
And I suppose the investors that invest in the fractional ownership of the properties are also potentially getting access to a property that they potentially couldn't afford on their own. So if they were going to invest their whole money, they might buy still a nice property, but obviously some of these are, mountain side, luxurious properties as well, aren't they? Which potentially on your own, people might not have been able to afford. So it gives opportunity to investors that hence may not have had the opportunity to invest in those properties as well.
Exactly. I said earlier on that in my property search, I looked at all different shapes and sizes of properties, from a pile of stones in a field to a palatial mansion. And I still see that palace every month I'm in Italy. I go and have a look, and is it still for sale? And maybe one day, who knows? But that was, several million euros, and that's just nuts to invest that sort of money. And I'll come back to what you see is not what you pay in a few moments. But a lot of people would love to have a 4 or 5 bedroom villa with a pool and a vineyard and an olive grove and all of these romances. And it stays that. It stays a dream, and then it will get parked and then it will get forgotten. And they reduce their aspirations to match their available amount of disposable income. We kind of open up the aspiration or the dream door by saying, if your budget is 200,000, for example, then 200,000 is going to buy you a a 2-bedroom apartment or maybe a small house that needs restoration. And then you're back into what do I use it for in the 47 weeks, 45 weeks I'm not there. What we are able to offer is saying for a fraction of the value of the property, you can actually have part ownership of that. It's real asset ownership. And it's the elephant in the room is listeners might be saying, hang on a minute, this is timeshare. And the difference between timeshare and fractional ownership is very simple. It's what's written on the tin. Timeshare means exactly that. You are sharing time in a club membership, and when you die, that membership dies with you. Fractional ownership means exactly what it says. You share the asset ownership with other like-minded individuals, and in our properties, it's a maximum of 12 and an average of 8, and I'll explain why in just a moment. And that's a real asset ownership that you can dispose of and sell and enjoy the gain over years, just like you would with any other property in Italy. It's as simple as that. And the most important thing is you only pay a fraction of the annual running costs. What I often see, and I have encountered myself when we buy properties, you get taken around a property by an Italian estate agent, and whatever price you negotiate the acquisition for, whether it's a £50,000 ruin or a £1 million villa, whatever it might be, you have to budget an on cost of around 20% on whatever price you negotiated. Why? Well, first of all, as a non-EU citizen and a non-resident of Italy, you have to pay the government 10% purchase tax. Simple as that. That's on the property. If you are somebody who wants an enormous amount of land, then there could be an 8% tax on the land. So we'll forget about that. Let's just keep it at 10% property tax. Then you have to pay 4% commission to the estate agent. In Italy, an estate agent earns a ridiculously high commission from both seller and buyer, and seller and buyer pay an average of 4% each. So we're up to 14% already. Then you have to have your legal and conveyancing fees. That's going to be another 3%. There's 17. And you can bet your bottom dollar the other 3% will be on your moving cost, your airfares, your traveling, your refurnishing, your redecoration. So it's whatever. If you buy something for 300,000, it's 360,000. And then you've got the annual running costs. With our properties, each owner pays a fraction of what the value of the property is, and then an equal fraction of the annual running costs. Our biggest, most expensive villa, Casa Tremonto, 5 bedrooms, heated infinity swimming pool. It's in 20,000 square meters of land, olive groves, vineyards, etc., etc. The annual running cost of that is fixed at €5,000 a year, and that covers everything. You don't have to go and find out from the local commune, how do you pay your electricity bill, and who do I pay the property tax to, and who do I ring because the washing machine stopped working, and who's going to clean the pool, who's going to clean the house, who's going to do the livings, or everything is included right the way through to full property insurance. So we take the worry and fear out of who looks after my property. We take the worry and fear over how much is it going to cost each year. And we can raise people's expectations by inviting them to have something much bigger, much grander, much better than perhaps they thought of. Or, and I'll go back to 12, but an average of 8 owners, there is never any more than 12 shares in any one of our property, and that gives each owner 4 weeks exclusive use of that property as their own property every single year. In all of our properties, we have some owners that have multiple shares. So if you have 2 shares, that gives you 8 weeks a year. 3 shares gives you 12 weeks a year. And one of our owners says, well, hang on, I actually want the best of both worlds. I love the palazzo that we have, a 500-year-old palazzo converted into 3 apartments, 2 bedrooms and 1 bedroom. And one owner has a share in the villa and a share in the palazzo, so they can enjoy all of the fun of city centre living for 2 weeks of the year, and the other 2 weeks of the year they laze around the pool, soaking up the views and have fun. So we always try to say the answer is yes. Now, what's the question? What is it people are really looking for? How can I tell you the story of my journey and my dream, and how can I share that with you? So the only time I use share in our business isn't timeshare, it's lifestyle sharing and dream sharing.
Yeah. So when you decided to not do it as your retirement home and then do it as this business model, did your mindset change a little bit in terms of, okay, I'm building this, I can spend what I've got to build my house, but now it's kind of a business. So how did your mindset change between, I suppose, managing your cash flow and your money? Did it make a difference? Did you think differently, or?
Massively differently, and I have to give a huge 99% credit to my wife, Dawn. I fell in love with the concept of Campagna and fractional ownership a few months before I met Dawn. And I can remember saying, Dawn, before this relationship gets any more serious, I think you need to come out to Italy to see what I'm up to, because it's kind of non-negotiable. It comes with me. She came out and stood in exactly the same place I did when I bought the first property. She looked across the Cilento National Park, looked behind her, and she said, I get it. I can't, and you can't, and we can't change what we're looking at. That's a beautiful national park. It's UNESCO protected. It will never change. What sits behind us is this broken down old 300-year-old stone farmhouse, and we can have great fun restoring that and turning it into whatever we want. And your concept of then being able to share that by selling it under fractional ownership enables us together to form the Pinelli Group and then repeat the exercise. And that's what we've been doing over the last 10 years, repeating, and we're now on our 9th property. It had a massive impact on how we would lead our lives, because rather than going to Italy to retire, Dawn and I have had 3 holidays, I think, in the last 10 years. The first wasn't a holiday, it was our honeymoon. And then we had a holiday to the Caribbean. And then we've had one holiday in Croatia that turned out to be more of a busman's holiday. But it doesn't matter, because we live there, we're immersed in the business. We both have a history in property. Dawn has a history in interior design. I'm more the nuts and bolts guy. Dawn is the person that turns a house into a home and has created the beautiful interiors and exteriors of every single one of our properties. The business concept didn't take very long to work out in my mind. It took a very, very long time with an enormous amount of consultation to work out the most efficient way of managing the business from a growth point of view, from a cash flow point of view, and for the most tax efficient point of view. And I'm proud to say that our advisory partners are Wilkinson Accountants, and we're working very closely with them to develop the much more efficient way of working than I had when we first started. So yeah. Big changes.
Yeah. No, but I mean, you're in United Property. I mean, just what I love about the story, Nigel, is just the dream, the passion, the hard work, and then actually making it successful. You know, you are doing it. I know there is a lot of talk between whether people agree with timeshare and fractional ownership, because I've seen it on a couple of posts I've put. But I think the point is, regardless of whether people agree with the business model or not, nobody can take away from the fact, you know, that you've put that hard work in and you have built something successful. And you are giving opportunity, and I know how important it is to you, because obviously I've been where the properties are as well, is how much you're actually giving back as well to that local community. When we went with my team to the properties, because we went round and saw a lot of the properties, didn't we? I probably would have had to go there 10 times, I'd say, to get the sort of local experience, I think, that you managed to bring to us when we went with our staff. And I mean, we just went on a holiday, but it was lovely. And I just think it's fantastic what you've built there, because, you know, you've built this dream and picked up. So yeah, I really think it's good. Yeah, whether it's a business or whether it's a change in career or anything, you know, they want to do something. And I think this just shows if you start taking action and you visualize it and you plan for it, you know, you can make things happen. You just have to put the hard work to get there.
You do have to put the hard work. And then I think the most important lesson I've learned is I stopped having preconceptions. It touched me greatly. And I hope you don't mind me saying, Julie, your husband actually said to me when he visited with you recently, he said, Julie told me that we were going on this sort of working business trip to Italy, and he wasn't very motivated or excited to go to Italy because he had some preconceptions. Mm-hmm. And he said within a very few minutes of arriving at Casa Tramonto in the hills above the seaside town of Agropoli, he said it just changed his mindset completely, because he was receptive to what he could see and understood that his preconceptions were wrong. I often say to people, if you go up to 10 or 100 people in the street today and say to them, don't think, just answer me, name your top 5 holiday destinations in Europe, Italy probably won't even feature on that. It's Spain, Portugal, Greece, Turkey, and probably Tunisia or Morocco. Italy is still perceived as being beyond the reach of most people. It's too expensive. It's too this, it's too that. Because most people see Italy as what I call the Northern Crescent. That's from Pisa all the way around to Florence and all of the famous cities. And believe me, they have to be visited, and they're beautiful, and they are very expensive. But that's the north. We're in the south of Italy, which is real Italy. Dawn calls it the raw, naked Italy, because it hasn't been overdeveloped by tourism and will never be overdeveloped by tourism because of the national parks and the protection we get offered. So that's number one. Number two is it's very, very easy for me to see what my potential clients see, because Dawn and I are the very epitome of fractional owners. We arrived in Italy to have a house to keep for ourselves to retire in. And very quickly, we changed our outlook on life. We changed our model, and we spent all of our time and all of our money making that house as beautiful as possible to share with others. And we sold it as a fractional ownership. And then we reinvested the money. And still to this day, much to my wife's annoyance, I don't own a property in Italy because we're busily repeating this business model all the time. So it just kind of works. It really does work. And it gives people the opportunity to have something they only thought that was available in their dreams, never in their reality.
And I'm just interested to know, when you were doing this, you know, obviously friends and family back home in the UK, I mean, did you get a lot of like negativity or backlash where people going, oh, you can't do it or it won't work? Did you have that?
Interesting question. We had it in every single person that I spoke to, both from family, but more importantly, professionally. Every accountant, lawyer, builder, surveyor, local tourism, everyone that I spoke to in Italy said, you're absolutely bonkers. You're raving mad. It will never work. And I said, why won't it? And they said, because it's never been done before. And as soon as people say that to me, that just excited me, because I saw it from a cup half empty, or is it a cup half full? I just knew that it would work, and I ignored every single piece of professional advice and went with my passion and my knowledge, and I just knew this would work. And now here we are 10 years on and on our 9th property, and it just keeps on working. It's simple as that. From a friends and family, what I very quickly learned the difference between people you know who thought were your friends. The amount of times we had, this is Dawn and myself, we had that wonderful phrase, "It's all right for you. You're not working. You're just on permanent holiday in Italy." Well, that's fine, and I understand their closed mind attitude, but it's been hard work, really hard work, in not only finding the property but finding the artisans we need to do the correct restorations, from Dawn's hard work in sourcing the interior design and furnishings. The one thing Italy doesn't have, you can't go along to a massive out of town shopping mall and buy everything in 5 minutes. It takes a lot of hard work and research. And in fact, Casa Tremonto, the property, the 5-bedroom property that Julie and her colleagues visited, Dawn took longer to find all of the furnishings in that property. It took her 2.5 years to furnish that property, and it took me 9 months to take it from a ruin to a finished building. So it's been a fantastic journey of fun, friendship, teamwork, and family. And now one of our owners actually coined the phrase Pinelli family. The Pinelli family's got two sides. It's got our incredible team that I'm very, very thankful work with Dawn and I, and they're part of our Pinelli family. And then we have the other side of the Pinelli family, which are all of our happy owners that are from all four corners of the world. So we're blessed.
Yeah, and as we come towards the end of the podcast, then, so how many properties? So you said 9. So what's the set? Just let people know what's still available and what are you working on, just so people listen. In case we have a lot of investors listen to this. If anyone's interested, what properties have you got available and in the group?
Well, I'm sure Julie will put a link to our website which describes our properties. Our properties fall into 2 distinct categories. First are city centre properties for people who really want to be within walking distance of bars, restaurants, shops, and the village community. And then we have our restored villas, which need a car most of the time because they're deliberately set to be higher and with better views and better grounds. It's very difficult to have a city centre property that you walk to that also has a 10 or 15 metre infinity pool. Just doesn't work like that. So from an entry price of around £50,000, you can have a shared ownership or fractional ownership in a 500-year-old palazzo in the centre of a historic centre that we've converted into 3 enormous luxury apartments, round to Vecchio Masseria, which is a 4-bedroom stone property on the hillside overlooking the marina and the beaches of Agropoli. We have Villa Velius, which is another 4-bedroom property. And later on this year, we'll be releasing Puro, which is probably going to be our last restoration property, because I've been told by my wife I have to retire at some point. I'm not quite sure when that's going to be. But have a look at the website. It gives you all of the information on there. And Julie, I'm more than happy for you to put a link. I'll give people my cell phone number and also my email address. And I'm happy to have a video conversation with anybody to just explain what the concepts are, what the pitfalls are, and what they should look out for, whether they're buying a property they want to own 100% for themselves, or whether they really want to understand the benefits that fractional ownership can give them by not using all of their capital for all of their time.
Well, thank you so much, Nigel. It's been really great to hear not only your story, but also your fractional ownership and delving a little bit into it so people understand what it is. So I just want to say thank you for coming on. And I also want to say lovely. And I just want to say thank you to our listeners. We launched a new YouTube channel this year for the Build and Exit. So I'd really love if people hit the subscribe button. But I'm proud. We've had over 4,000 downloads now. We've had it a year and we've had a lot more streamers. So it's this has been a great journey for me, and I get the privilege of speaking to all the lovely guests. So if you do love our channel, do hit the subscribe button. I look forward to seeing you soon.